Thank you for tuning in for the latest episode of the Rice Crypto Show. And today's episode is all about a decentralized Bitcoin trading and lending platform called Sovryn. And I am joined by one of the contributors, Yago. But before we get into it, if this just happens to be your first time ever watching any of my videos, I do encourage you to explore my channel. Make sure you're subscribed, smash that like button, and hit that notification bell so you can stay up to date with my videos as they come out. I also encourage everyone to check out my Patreon channel where I post up exclusive content, you get early access to videos, and it's a way to support the channel directly. Also, be sure to follow me on my sister channels on Library and Odyssey, where I post up extra content to encourage people to check out those decentralized platforms. And be sure to check out my audio podcast, Rice Radio. That is hosted on Anchor.fm. It's available on every major podcasting platform at Rice Radio, and new episodes are coming out weekly. And if you haven't heard, I have recently partnered up with Money Metals Exchange. You can get a free half ounce of silver if you visit moneymetals.com. You're a first-time buyer, you purchase $100 or more, and you use the promo code RICE, R-I-C-E, you'll get a free half ounce of silver, and it's an additional way to support the channel. Also, it's an awesome holiday gift you can get for someone that you care about as well. Gonna have links down below for everything we talk about on today's show, and we're just gonna go ahead and get right into it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, joining me on today's show is a gentleman by the name of Yago, and he is part of a decentralized Bitcoin trading and lending platform, something that's going to be launching very soon. It's been brought to my attention. It's called Sovryn.app. That's Sovryn.app, which we'll get into and all that good stuff. Yago, I really appreciate you accepting my invitation to come on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. It's lovely to be on the show.
And I'm definitely looking forward to it. We had a chance to kind of get to know each other briefly before we started recording. So I'm definitely looking forward to this conversation. And I want to thank Cody for hooking me up with bringing this project to my attention. Anything that's dealing with decentralization and taking the power away from these third-party intermediaries and giving it back to the people, I love. So we'll get into what Sovryn is. But before we do, who is Yago? And how did you ultimately get involved in cryptocurrency? And then we can expand on some of the stuff after we talk about the application as well, as we mentioned.
Yeah, well, I was born in South Africa during the apartheid to a family who were affiliated with the ANC and fighting apartheid, and had previously been involved in, various anarchist and communist movements that were important during the early part of the 20th century. So I think I have a long history of trying to create spaces of freedom, especially where the state encroaches upon them, from a familial perspective. And I grew up on that tradition in a very, very active way. So when I was a young boy, I was forced to sort of become a gold smuggler, and I would smuggle gold within my clothes out of the country because part of my family had been forced to flee South Africa. I continued to be politically active in South Africa, and then later in other places that I'd lived. And then in 2011, I was in the United States. I'd immigrated to the United States because, in my view, it was the beacon of freedom in the world, and I wanted to experience it. It was a little bit disappointing when I actually arrived in the United States to find out to what degree Americans themselves seem to have forgotten many of their own traditions. But in any event, I was living in the United States. I'd started a company there. And I came across the Satoshi white paper, and it screwed up everything. Because from that point on, I basically dropped everything else in my life to focus on Bitcoin. And the reason was that I think that, there's two great American idioms. One is money makes the world go round. And the second is when they want to say, when Americans want to ask you to speak the truth, they say, put your money where your mouth is. And I love those two idioms because one, they talk about the central importance of money to everything. And second, they talk about how money is truth. Money is how people, most truthfully represent their revealed preferences, their actual values. And so there's no form of speech more important than what you do with your money. And so to me, as someone who's interested in individual freedom and sovereignty, the ability to be part of a movement to create a sovereign money that would, not be created by some central organization, but made by the people, for the people, and of the people through, running nodes and mining and participating, was the most thrilling and important thing I could be involved in.
Well, for one, man, I really like your perspective on that. And, sometimes when we grow up, especially people like myself growing up here in the United States, I didn't have to experience the things that you experienced in South Africa. So, but those are the things that make us who we are today. And, we obviously don't want to change those because I think that those sharpen us and create us to be these people who think outside the box, these critical thinkers that are trying to push this freedom narrative and trying to, in a way, you said the Americans forgot a lot of their traditions, trying to clear up that amnesia that we've had and get back to understanding that individually we have power and we can make a lot of change individually, but together, I say it all the time, and it's so simple that when enough people take a stand, nothing can stand against the people. And we'll get into like all the kind of sovereign freedom, free man movements here in just a moment, because I think it's very relevant to what Sovryn is about as far as an application and what is trying to be created. But from what I can tell, and this is getting ready, it looks like it's getting ready to launch. It's in the early stages, and maybe you can correct me on that. But it's a decentralized Bitcoin and trading and lending platform. And what I'm finding interesting about that is, I'm sure you'll tell me about it, is the decentralized lending aspect, because most of the things that I see that deal with lending with Bitcoin are centralized custodial services like Celsius. Nothing against Celsius, because everything has a place and somebody may want to utilize that. But for those who want to have control and not your keys, not your crypto, and understand that mantra, then something like this would be definitely very, very, very important. So what exactly is Sovryn, and has it exactly launched, or is it about to launch?
So Sovryn is live, and by the time maybe your viewers see this, it will be also unlimited. In other words, right now there's a $21 limit on transactions because we're still testing the system and we want to make sure it's perfectly, or as that we want to have as high level of confidence in the system as possible. Mm-hmm. But we've been testing it for several months now without real problem. So I suspect that over the next week or two, it's going to just become available to anyone and an unlimited access. So what is it? Well, I think I see it as a direct extension of Bitcoin, or sometimes I would describe Sovryn as giving your Bitcoin superpowers. Because right now we have Bitcoin, which is this decentralized sovereign form of money, right? But it decentralizes the monetary layer of our society. But now every time you want to use your Bitcoin, you're going through some kind of centralized service. You're going through an exchange, you're going through like a Celsius or a BlockFi lending system. And so you're going through the process of giving them all of your private information, you're giving up your keys, you're giving up your control, you're giving up your sovereignty. And what Sovryn does is it's a protocol which is built on Bitcoin layer 2 that allows you to now start without any custodian, without any intermediary, lending your Bitcoin, trading your Bitcoin, leveraging your Bitcoin, and soon, also, and actually even now you can also acquire a Bitcoin-backed stablecoin. So let's say you have Bitcoin and you don't want to sell your Bitcoin. Like, who wants to sell their Bitcoin, right? But
Right.
you still need to eat, or you want to buy a house, or you want to buy your Lambo, right? The thing to do is you put your Bitcoin into some kind of service which will allow you to borrow dollars, right? Which you can then spend instead of selling your Bitcoin. So Sovryn allows you to do that without going through a centralized party. If you're like me and you don't have any fiat, basically, you're all in on Bitcoin, but you still want to buy more Bitcoin, you can do that by leveraging up your Bitcoin. In other words, borrowing more Bitcoin on the basis of your Bitcoin. If you think that you just want to earn passive yield on your Bitcoin, or you want to just trade it for some other token, you can do that through the Sovryn protocol as well. Again, no intermediaries, no central party, and you're constantly in control of your key. So as opposed to like a BlockFi or a Bitstamp, you don't actually deposit your funds into the system at any time. You connect your wallet to the system, and the transactions are happening directly to and from your wallet. And so really, for me, the reason I'm involved in Sovryn is because I want to do all of these things with my Bitcoin. And today I can't, because I don't have, a decentralized, I'm not going to give up the sovereignty of my assets to do all of these things.
Right. Right.
So,
By interacting with these centralized custodial services.
That's right.
Well, and I wanted to do a screen share so people can see exactly what is going on with Sovryn.app, and I'll have links down below for everything, but it's Sovryn.app. And as you can see, you would just click on the tab to go to the DApp. That's a decentralized application, and it would take you to the screen here, obviously on the trading aspect. And it does say that you have to engage your wallet, so you would have to connect your wallet up. So for people who are used to Ethereum-based exchanges where you got to connect like your MetaMask wallet, same concept. But this is going to be using the RSK network, which is something I really want to kind of learn a little bit about too. And I'm probably going to have to reach out to the people at RSK overall. I don't know what your involvement is with them, but I'm kind of thinking that this wouldn't be possible without the RSK platform. Is that?
Yeah, so RSK, or Rootstock, is a Bitcoin sidechain. And what that means is that it's a separate blockchain, right? So it works a bit differently. It has smart contracts, it has faster transaction times, it's got cheaper transaction times, but it's tied to Bitcoin in such a way that instead of being a completely separate chain, it's actually an extension or a second layer of Bitcoin. So in what way is that the case? Well, the consensus system for RSK is actually Bitcoin miners. So it's merged mined by Bitcoin miners. So Bitcoin proof of work drives the protocol, and the native currency of the protocol is Bitcoin, or Bitcoin and Rootstock, sometimes called RBTC, right? So you basically have this extension of the Bitcoin network, which allows Bitcoin to do things that the main chain can't and probably shouldn't do,
Right,
without having to change main chain. And I think this is, first of all, it's extremely cool in and of itself, but it also is cool because of what it means. It means that any interesting technology which is built on any other chain can be basically adopted by Bitcoin as a layer 2 permissionlessly. We don't even need the core devs to, come to consensus around it. Anyone can just go add their own layer 2 chain, which maybe Sovryn will one day become its own layer 2 chain, right? Just focused on what Sovryn is for. And so Bitcoin itself becomes the unifier, like the center of gravity for this decentralized financial and economic space.
well, what it kind of like when I first kind of glanced at it, what it reminded me was like a more decentralized or a more version for the people kind of a concept that Blockstream created with Liquid, like the Liquid sidechain. In a comparative sense, and I mean, and we see with all the talk with Ethereum even with Ethereum 2.0 launching, you still are seeing all these different platforms that are trying to create side layer solutions like Matic. I mean, you're just seeing it happen. So, I mean, I think it's part of the evolution, side chains, whether parachains, parathreads, kind of like how Polkadot does. Nexus has a really cool concept with how they layer everything out. But as far as being able to do the decentralized lending, I can understand how the trading would work having your application. But if you're still in possession of your Bitcoin with, you know, by having the possession of your private keys, how does the lending part work?
Yeah, so in the lending part, there's a smart contract. What is a smart contract, right? It's basically a contract written in code. And so what you do is you make your Bitcoin available to be borrowed, right? And then people can come and borrow them. And then you basically, when someone borrows your Bitcoin, or basically the contract, as you're making your Bitcoin available to be borrowed, it gives you an interest token, right? Token that earns interest on the basis of what you've just lent. And then and that's held in your wallet. And if at any time you want your Bitcoin back, you basically go and say, I want to withdraw here, take my interest token back and give me Bitcoin. And what the system does is it will basically use this aggregated pool of Bitcoin as a pool. And if someone wants to withdraw, it allows them to withdraw their Bitcoin and everyone else keeps on earning interest. And the people who are borrowing, they're doing so in the form of over-collateralized loans. So let's say you want to borrow $100 worth of Bitcoin, you would need to collateralize $150 worth of like some kind of USD stablecoin, for example.
Okay. So this kind of takes the risk out of someone from actually losing their said asset. Like if they wanted to put Bitcoin up to lend it out and to earn some interest on it, it definitely lets them know that the person on the other side, regardless, that there's not going to be a default. You're not going to lose your Bitcoin because of smart contracts. The way that you're over collateralizing makes sense, man. I think it's a great concept. So you're thinking that here, because we're recording this on the 6th of December, it's probably going to get released and it's Sunday. It'll probably get released on Monday or Tuesday. So the 7th or 8th. When are you thinking that we're going to see like a limit increase on the DApp with the trading side?
So I think over the next 2 weeks. So certainly before Christmas, I would imagine.
Okay, great. And then for people who are on vacation, they could definitely assume that by the beginning of the year or at your holidays, that they're definitely going to be able to utilize this. And I'll keep people up to date because I think this is a really cool concept. As a contributor, do you mind me asking like what kind of contributions you've made to the project?
Yeah, I've contributed in a lot of different ways, I think. I have a UK-based company which has done part of the development work for the system. I have helped with some of the architectural and design parts, especially sort of like the user-facing design. And I've helped try and explain the system, like write about it. I'm on your podcast talking about it.
Right.
And I think one of the ways that I'm trying to help is providing liquidity and being a cheerleader.
Awesome. And cool. And like we talked before we recorded, there's not really a founder per se. This is very much of a team oriented thing with lots of different people that are making Sovryn work the way that it works.
Yeah. So it's totally open source. It's a completely open community. You can come to Sovryn Discord. So in our Discord channel, you can see, the people from the adoption team talking about how they're going to try and explain this to people. You can see the devs talking about how they're building the system. You can see the front end guys talking about design and how they're implementing the website. And you can jump into any of these conversations, and the number of people who are working on the project just keeps growing and growing and growing because people, first of all, I think it's a really exciting project. People find it very charismatic, and also literally anyone can join. And we're trying to figure out as a community, like also how we compensate all of these sort of early contributors. So My company has been paying some of the people who have been involved. Some people have donated money, and and then there's also the SOV token, which will give you a right to the revenue that the protocol drives. And people who are working on the protocol or contributing now are also able to get like allocations of SOV. So it's a very, very exciting project, both because it is sort of open source and community oriented, but it's also a decentralized business in that people are sort of like able to earn what is kind of like the equivalent of decentralized equity in the system by contributing to it.
That's beautiful. That's definitely beautiful. And that's the thing I like about the cryptocurrency space. And again, I'm going to have links down below for everything that I'm showing here. And I definitely am encouraging people to check it out. And for people who want to know more about Rootstock, I'll have, it's rsk.co, but I'll have the link down below. And also there's this really cool article on bitcoin.com talking about the smart contract protocols and how Rootstock RSK is attempting to bring DeFi to the Bitcoin network, which I think is a big thing because there's all this talk about Bitcoin, I mean, DeFi, but most of it is dealing with the Ethereum network. And because of that, you're seeing you're just seeing a whole jump in the Ethereum space, and you're seeing like Bitcoin becoming wrapped up in the Ethereum network. And you're seeing, I think there's more Bitcoin being used on the Ethereum network than through the Lightning network, which is crazy to think about because of the smart contracts, wrapping up a Bitcoin in a smart contract and having an ERC representation token of said Bitcoin so that you can utilize Bitcoin on that network, but it's not actually the Bitcoin. It's really crazy, especially for people who are just getting into the space.
Right. It's really cool how Ethereum has demonstrated ways in which we can decentralize not just the monetary layer, but also the financial layer. And what I love about Sovryn is it takes those concepts, and instead of trying to wrap Bitcoin up, and give you like an ERC20 IOU on a different chain, it does this in a Bitcoin native way. And so you can use your Bitcoin with decentralized applications, decentralized services. And if we are successful, if Sovryn is successful, you'll never need to use another centralized exchange again.
That's beautiful, man. And I was telling you too before we started that I really like the comic book feel of the website and the honey badger on here. It's because the honey badger is so synonymous with Bitcoin for people who are unfamiliar. But this comic book thing looks really cool. And now that I'm seeing this, I was wondering if, was this being promoted in some sense last year? I feel like I've seen something to do with the Sovereign Bitcoiners Manifesto. I feel like I have something.
I think the manifesto was published on the 29th of August in Bitcoin Talk by Aurora.
Okay. Of this year?
Yeah.
Okay. So I might be confusing it with something else then.
Yeah. If anyone's sort of like the founder of the project, like the Satoshi of Sovryn is Aurora.
Okay.
But instead of writing a white paper, she wrote the manifesto.
Right. Very cool. Very cool. Well, I mean, I'm going to have to be paying a lot of attention to what's going on with Sovryn.app and the name Sovryn, as we were talking before we were recording. And hopefully that's one of the reasons why Cody wanted to connect us, is because in me branching out with my content, in addition to covering cryptocurrency, I've been researching things in regards to law, this idea of legal fiction and a straw man, and us being corporate entities, even all of our nations being possibly corporate entities, and how it interacts with what people refer to as the Triple Crown, the Vatican, City of London, and the District of Columbia. And you had mentioned a project that I'm not sure if you said you're a part of it or if it's something that you're just looking into, but something to do with in Honduras. The word sovereign, I love the word, but I try not to use it in context of talking about the legal fiction type stuff, because back in the early 90s, there was such a big movement of the sovereign citizen,
Yeah.
which is an oxymoron in and of itself. And I think that that's kind of the sovereign word in that aspect has been somewhat tainted, almost how anarchy has been tainted. You know, what anarchy means is being no ruler, no master. And now all of a sudden it's a definition for Antifa and lawlessness and chaos, because the socially accepted norm, that's where we're at. And so
I
the
think,
sovereign word kind of has that double in you know, idea, which I don't want to get into the idea of what that word is about. I mean, it's a great word and I like it being used with the application, but you're very much involved in a lot of these things that me and you talked about. You would talk about this Honduras project and tell me about some of these things that you're thinking about, ways that we can work towards changing the world, individually and collectively.
right. Well, maybe before I get into Honduras specifically, I'll say one of the things that I'm extremely interested in is competitive governance. I think monopolies, we know, are a bad idea, right? And there is no monopoly larger than government. It's a monopoly on violence, but it's a monopoly on violence that then uses that monopoly on violence to try and assert monopolies on all kinds of things: education, printing money, healthcare, and the list goes on and on and on. And as you get these larger and larger monopolies, they become less and less responsive to people. And so in the United States, it was just this, very recently, there was this election. And most people get really, really excited about elections. Is it going to be Biden? Is it going to be Trump? Is it going to be the Democrats? Is it going to be the Republicans? And my feeling is like, who cares? They're so similar. Like, it's like, who's going to be the CEO of the monopoly that's going to ignore my wishes? Right? So the beautiful thing about free markets is that they are extremely responsive, not just to the wishes of the people in the aggregate, but to the wishes of the individuals. So in aggregate, they created this, you know, soft drinks as an alternative to like dirty water as something you can drink, right? But as individuals, you get to drink Pepsi and I get to drink Coke, right? And the fact that I'm drinking Coke doesn't impact your ability to access. It's not like we all vote every 4 years. All right, everyone's going to drink Pepsi or everyone's going to drink Coke.
That would be hardcore, man.
That would be, yeah, think about the Twitter, how Twitter would look, right? It would all be about Pepsi and Coke. They would love it, right? So competitive governance, to me, introducing this element of having more competition in governance is, to me, the way that you create a higher degree of responsiveness and, as a result, better governance for everyone. Another way of thinking about that is, if you make governments compete, then they have to get better and better, or they fail, right? In the same way that companies that don't offer the best service eventually get outcompeted. And so government would constantly be improving. And the way you create that is, instead of having just voting, or what I would call voice, right? And again, it's an extremely weak form of voice, but you know, voice, we all shout, we protest, we vote. You also get exit, the ability to go and say, you know what, screw it, I'm just gonna, you know, start drinking Pepsi. So how you create that, I think it can be created anywhere. I think you could have, you know, I think in the United States, you have, one of the reasons the United States has been successful is there's multiple different states. And so the monopoly power is reduced in comparison to other countries. But we can go much further. And so I see Bitcoin as a way of introducing competitive governance around money. And in Honduras, I was involved with a group of people who helped change the constitution of Honduras to create the ability or opportunity to create free zones, which would have extremely high degrees of autonomy. And basically any group of people could vote for themselves to be in part of this new government, right? Mm-hmm. Ruled by this new government. And it didn't even need to be geographical. So you could have like a guy voting himself into governance which didn't have like, which he didn't live like in a particular area.
Okay.
Now it's that happened. Those constitutional changes were made around 2013, and since then it's been very, very slow going. But the first of these zones actually recently just launched, and it's called Prospera, and you can check it out. You can go to prospera.hn. That's the website, and it is the world's first sort of free trade zone, which has its own court system, has its own immigration policy, has basically the ability to create its own rules, and is adopting into Honduras common law and good governance and minimalist governance. So it's a minarchy, right?
Okay.
And so it's creating this new type of experiment around creating new competitive governance. And so that's also something I'm extremely excited about and somewhat involved in.
Is it Prospera?
Yes, I'm actually pretty bad at spelling. So if I try to imagine the word in my head.
I think I found it. I want to do a
yes, so it's Prospera.hn.
Is this it right here?
That's right.
A platform for sustainable growth launching in, I'm going to say Rotan.
Rotan, yeah.
Rotan. Cool. Cool.
So
we'll definitely have to have this
island
down below.
It's a primarily English-speaking island. Beautiful. Caribbean island. And so what they're calling is they call it a platform, but it's basically a platform for governance.
This is really cool. I have to take some time and really research into what it is. But it's, anything like this, like the idea of creating free zones. I think from a military perspective with studies and things that have been done, the idea of what we think about as countries and nations may eventually become more obsolete. And you may have like these mega city type situations. You may have regions that are different than other regions in their governance system, so that people can choose how they want to live and what sort of society they want to participate in, as opposed to being forced and coerced into doing what the government say that everybody should be doing.
Are you familiar perhaps with the book The Machinery of Freedom by David Friedman?
No, I'm not.
So Milton Friedman, I think probably many of your listeners know, was the founder of the Chicago School of Economics, a very freedom-orientated, free market-orientated school of economics, which became basically maybe the most influential school of economics in the United States for the last 50 years, and probably what's the ideological infrastructure for like Reaganomics, right?
Okay.
His son is David Friedman. David wrote a book called Machinery of Freedom, which I would recommend to anyone. It is an extremely interesting, well thought, and out there book, in that a lot of people, when they imagine what greater freedom could look like, right? Greater competitive governance could look like, they think about the past. They think about like Greece with its city-states, right? London would have different governments from Birmingham. New York would have a different government from Albany, right?
Right.
New York City, right? So David says you can do this without having to introduce the territorial or geographic aspects of it. And he uses examples from the past of where this has actually happened. And he wrote this book quite a while ago, but if you read the book with the lens on, with the knowledge of that we're now in 2021 with a massively digital world, you start to recognize that many of the functions of government could really be treated as services. And I could choose between them in the same way that I choose between my insurance companies, right? Mm-hmm. Like who's going to take care of me if someone breaks into my apartment? Why does it have to be like I could choose between Apple and Google, and both of them have tried to create the best possible service they can. Who's going to provide me with transport? Who's going to provide education? None of these things need to necessarily be geographically located, right? Especially you think about education. So court systems can be distributed, right? Businesses do this all the time. Like if my company signs an agreement with your company, we could decide that the court of law that's going to decide whatever dispute we might have could be in the Cayman Islands or Gibraltar or London, right?
Right.
Why can't individuals do the same thing? So it's an extremely interesting and thought-provoking book, and I think becoming more and more real with every passing day.
Well, this is a book that I'm definitely going to check out. And one, I mean, we're going to have more conversations.
By the way, the nice thing about the Machinery of Freedom is it's downloadable as a free PDF from David Friedman's website.
Then what I will do is I will find that and I will get a link to it and make sure it's linked down below for anybody else who's watching this and is interested in getting a copy of it. Because the more information and knowledge we can share, with everybody, the more that we can start manifesting this better future for all of us. I think it would be a beautiful thing. And I do a lot of roundtable conversations with a variety of people on subjects kind of like what we're talking about now. So I would definitely like to invite you back on for some more conversations, learn more about some of these freedom, oriented aspect things that you're involved in and heard about, and even get some more recommendations, like some books like that you did, especially tell me about this project in Honduras. And I would also like, to revisit some things going on with Sovryn too. Maybe we can have somebody else within the project come on with you. I mean, we can do a little group thing and kind of talk a little bit more about Sovryn as the project and platform kind of develops out more. But I guess before we do wrap up today's interview, did you have anything else that you wanted to touch on, or anything that you wanted to add in regards to what we said that we didn't mention?
Well, I think maybe one thing. I'm extremely excited about Sovryn, and I want everyone to use it. I don't think people should have to be technically proficient or have, encountered the right people during their lives to be freedom oriented enough to capture freedom for themselves. I would ideally want everyone to be sovereign by default. And so, but there's always a cost, right? I mean, when you build things where people need to be self-reliant and responsible for themselves, it means that they need to take on more responsibility. Like if you're using a centralized exchange, you just send your coins to the centralized exchange and you trust them to take care of it. Whereas with a system like ours, you have to figure out which wallet you want to use, and you connect your wallet, and you always maintain control, but you kind of have to be a little bit more aware.
Right.
So especially at the beginning of projects like this, there's always a higher barrier to entry. And what we kind of right now need is we need maybe your listeners, like the people who understand the importance of this stuff, who are willing to go through a little bit of inconvenience and make the extra effort to be sovereign themselves, to come try out Sovryn and tell us all the ways in which we can make it easier and better to use, so that the next wave of people who are a little bit more ignorant than your listeners won't get too scared, and we'll be able together to help them maintain their sovereignty.
Well said. Well said. I couldn't even have said it any better. I mean, that's really like what right now Bitcoin and cryptocurrency kind of are in general. I mean, we're kind of test bedding this technology and working out all the bugs, all the kinks, so that when we start getting to that point that mainstream is ready to come on, at the same time that the technology is ready for mainstream, then that marrying of the two, I think, would work out a lot better than if we tried to do it today. So, well, Yago, man, I really appreciate it. If you could bear with me 1 second, I want to wrap things up. And after I'm done recording, I want to talk to you for 1 second. So, ladies and gentlemen, again, I'm going to have links down below for everything we talked about in today's episode. I do appreciate you tuning in. If this is your first time ever watching any of my videos, I do encourage you to explore my channel. Make sure you're subscribed, smash that like button. I encourage you to hit the notification bell so you can stay up to date with my videos as they come out. Check out my Patreon channel, my audio podcast, Rice Radio, hosted on anchor.fm. It's available on all major podcasting platforms. And as always, I encourage you to be the change by practicing change.